Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rocky here with Father Boniface. And Father, I wanted to talk a little bit about an extension from the last conversation about how we're called to join sainthood, how we're called down the path. And one of the things coming from previous conversations, to be a saint is to exemplify virtue. I believe the terminology used was in a heroic way. And of the virtues, there are most of them you can just keep going more and more all in. I can become more charitable. I can become better at relationships and better at loving. I can grow my courage and constantly want to have more with that. But the one that is sometimes the challenge for people is the one that is humility. Because humility, there is no most humble. Humility is a balance. It is the recognition of where your skill set is, where your proficiency is, as in comparison to the relationship of those around you. For instance, when you are trying to determine who would be the best person to present this message, say it's the entire diocese coming together and we're having a big, massive event and someone needs to do a homily. Well, the Catholic Church does this before selecting the new priest. They bring all of the people together, all of the people who potentially could vote, and some people get to be chosen to give homilies and special speeches during that Mass. There are people who have more talent at that than others. And saying, hey, I am capable of doing this message. I know what I'm talking about. I can do this is a recognition of your abilities, skills that you're called to grow and develop as part of the other virtues. But I see so often people wanting to shy away from that and saying, well, by acknowledging that I'm good at something means that I'm not humble. And this mentality that says I have to be small and the tiniest person in the room is the only way you can be humble. And knowing that, to recap our episode on humble, which again, I invite you all to go to the Virtue series. It's somewhere around like the 90s. And when you look at episodes of Father and Joe, that humility is that recognition of where is my place, and that there is nothing wrong with striving to be better, to be able to communicate the messages and have a knowledge base behind it. And I wanted to basically dive into this thought process of excelling in a talent and developing a skill is not contrary to being humble or blessed is the meek, which is the two kind of counterpoints, or I want to say excuses, that people give for why they don't want to step up and grow in a particular facet. So I wanted to kind of talk about this concept because it has been presented as two contrary ways to live the faith. And I'm basically coming with the argument that it's not, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe humility is that it's true. It's truth or honesty. Humility is honesty. And so it's seeing ourselves as we are, neither better nor worse, but to be honest with who we are, see ourselves as we are. And so if I'm a talented speaker, identifying that is, first of all, it's giving glory to God, because it's not like I made myself a talented speaker. It's really a gift that God has given. And then the humble thing to do is to use that. In a similar way, if there's a place of honor set aside for a particular individual, taking the place that is set aside for you is humble. That's honest. That place is set aside for me. It has my name on it. Or sometimes there's a space for the priest. Sometimes in church parking lots, there's a place reserved for clergy, and there are different reasons for that. Sometimes we roll in late because we've been off, at a hospital call and we've got to get back from mass. And then if I have to park in the back of the parking lot, that's going to inconvenience everybody. So it's not just because he's more important or something. There's a special role and perhaps a need that might be set aside. But to come into a parking lot and say, no, I'm not going to take the place that's marked for me. I'm going to take up a place that belongs to somebody else then. That's going to be one less parking spot because nobody else is going to take that place. It's reserved for the priest. So humility sometimes, well, for good reason, but we sometimes have a misconception of what humility is, that it's somehow making ourselves worse than we are. There's a good reason for that, because that's the direction we're less. Some people, anyway, different people go different directions. Some people regularly make themselves worse than they are. Some people regularly make themselves better than they are. We kind of have to know, again, it's humble to know where we tend in that conversation. But it's perhaps most challenging and most problematic for the person who is inclined to make himself better than he is, to self-promote or to be self-inflated, the egotist or the narcissist. And so that person needs to pay attention to, trying to put himself in the lowest place, going to the lower place when there isn't a place clearly marked, So anyway, at the end of the day, humility is honesty, humility is truth. And we grow in that best when we are really open to the feedback of others in the sense of a mirror. So we want to surround ourselves with people who will be honest with us, honest in praising what is good, honest in pointing out what is bad, honest in praising what is excellent, honest in pointing out what is substandard. And so we can get a real sense of who we are. And people tell me that I'm a good speaker. I feel like a good speaker, and I like to do it. So good. If there's an opportunity and they ask me to give a keynote or a conference talk or something, I'm not going to excuse myself to say I'm not capable. I clearly am capable. Now, there may be other reasons I don't think I'm the best person for this particular speaking role, something like that. But again, I want to say that from a place of honesty. And another way to frame this is to say, well, who I am and what I am in the eyes of God, that is what I am. Nothing more, nothing less. And so as God sees me is the way that I truly am. Sometimes we can pull things over on people. And that's what, somebody who is a charlatan, sometimes used car salesmen get a bad rap. It's like, yeah, they can sell you that old jalopy off the lot and make it sound 10 times better than it is, and you drive it away and the wheel falls off or whatever. It's possible for us to sell ourselves in a false way, and some people are particularly good at that and need to be particularly careful about not doing that. But we want to align more and more with truth, and God. Ultimately, we might be able to snow over other people, but we can't pull the wool over God's eyes. He sees clearly, and so we can say, how I appear in His sight is how I really am, and then that's what I can embrace. Now, there may be other reasons to undersell ourselves in certain places so as not to be overbearing or intimidating or some things like that. We don't need to tell everybody all of our credentials all the time. In different settings, being honest, just showing up as we are, and means just leaving things unsaid. It's not saying I'm not very bright. Well, that's probably not that's not a true statement, but I don't have to tell everybody all of my degrees either. And so there's a level of discretion that's involved in humility. And then just a last word, I suppose. Sometimes they say humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And
Mm.
that's a nice reframe as well, that being too self-focused, too self-absorbed is contrary to the virtue of humility. And just forgetting, being self-forgetful, that I'm more focused on others. I go out of myself to celebrate the successes of someone else or the great qualities of someone else, to delight in someone else. That's a very humble thing to do, being self-forgetful in that way.
That's probably one of the most underrated things that is a commonality between the saints, if not all of the saints, certainly the ones in which I have studied. They're not sitting around worrying about themselves, worrying about what are they going to get out of this. And yes, at the end of the day, they all did economic transactions, and by definition, an economic transaction is a trade. So it's thinking at the time this is going to be a good thing for both of us, and like any other trade in life, some of them are perfectly balanced, but most of them have a tilting one way or the other, and there's nothing you can do about that. Like, hey, I really thought that chicken sandwich was going to look amazing, but after I ate it, it really wasn't as good as I thought it was. Or the opposite. Wow, that was so much better than I thought it was going to be. I got a total deal there buying it for X. But to your point of they're not worried about themselves. They're always focusing upon the others around them. And they all take their missions in different ways and different hows they go about it. Going back to the quote from Pope Francis that you said in last episode was that we're all called to live the gospel in a particular moment today in our own way. Well, that's a fancy way of saying we all do it. We all do our how in a different fashion. We are going about this in our own unique way. So, with that being said, that focus of not caring about me is the wrong way of saying this, but caring more about others and paying attention to their needs, wants, and desires is incredibly contrary to the way in which we're wired. We are wired to constantly feel things that are happening to us. That's literally what your nervous system does. You feel something that's happening to you, your nervous system is telling you about it. And then you have all these feelings inside you that are in reactions to tell your brain, hey, something is happening to you. And to consciously focus upon others, even though you're having something that an impulse inside you might be triggering bells or whistles, maybe good or bad, but the focus upon others is a really hard skill set that all of the saints have. And we kind of just take it for granted that some people have this or some people don't. But I am really confident that anyone can learn how to do this if they know how to spend the time and energy to do it. So, Father, with about 5 minutes left or so in this episode, could you teach the people how to become self-forgetting, as you said, and really embodying paying attention and loving others?
Yeah, well, in 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, that's not hard or anything.
Yeah, well, maybe to recognize what's hard about that. One of the things that we've talked about is how well trauma it affects us and can get us into a place when we're not. We can become more self-forgetful when we're not self-protective, and we're not self-protective when we feel safe, secure, fundamentally when we feel loved. And so it's in our being seen, and that would be fundamentally what Conrad Bars would call affirmation. Emotional affirmation is somebody who sees me and delights in me for who I am. And that creates a foundation of freedom, of interior freedom, that I can then forget about myself. I don't have to prove myself. I don't have to make myself. I don't have to try to build up my identity. I don't have to do all of those things because it's already given to me. I've received that. Conrad Bars called it a second birth, to go forth from that. And a lot of times, if we notice when we're becoming self referential or self um, not self-forgetful, then a lot of times that is in response to some form of a threat. I don't feel like I'm going to be received by somebody, and then maybe more fundamentally, I don't feel like I'm good in and of myself, and that's often, I use the word feeling intentionally. It may not be at a conscious, at an intelligent, intellectual level. I may know I am good. I'm made in the image of God. I can uh, repeat all of the catechism answers to that. And yet the fact is, I don't have confidence to feel that I'm good. And that's the pathway that we sometimes describe as self-knowledge, followed by self-possession, which makes possible self-gift. And I don't become self-possessed unless I know myself, but really also unless I've been given the gift of myself by someone else who has seen me. A little bit like I was saying earlier, we are mirrored by people around us who love us and are honest with us. And so I discover in your face, in a way, who I am. When you look at me with scorn, I feel scornful. Uh, when you look at me with delight, I feel delightful. And that receiving from others, and especially from those who know us and most deeply and love us best, you're laying lots of foundations of firm foundations in your children through that affirmation, which is so profound coming from parents. And so, uh, yeah, so how do I become more self-forgetful? Well, again, notice the places where I'm self referential or feel insecure, and then I can start to explore why I am insecure in those places, perhaps share that with somebody who will love me and see me and affirm me in those places. And that will help me to forget myself, to not pay attention to, it's like uh, if you get a black eye, you walk into a room and you're wondering what everyone is thinking about your eye. You're noticing the way people notice that black eye. If you have something that you think is uh, will attract negative attention, you'll constantly be focused on how people see that thing that you think will attract negative attention. And so if you're free from that because you are confident that you are just loved, it's like little children are not worried about the booger hanging off of their nose, or the fact that they have a coal all over their face or something like that. They're a little child who is confident that he or she is loved has just forgotten about all of that and doesn't know that that's even an issue. And so we grow into that again by being loved fundamentally, and loved especially in the places that we have some insecurities around.
Yeah, and that's an amazing way to end the episode, is the way in which to maybe jump a couple steps further here. The way in which to really get to the point of forgetting yourself is to build that in other people, so that those around you have that same feeling that you just described in the children, that they know they're loved, so their black eye doesn't get called attention to. Their feeling of imperfection that the internet points out and tries to make filters to go away, you can say you don't need to hide that. You don't need to try to erase or change that. Whatever the case might be, because everyone goes through a different stage in their life when this is the scariest or worst thing ever. And I think that action of focusing upon building someone else up through love is the answer, is a great calling to take forward to this week, to move forward and to look for opportunities in the small elements of each day. How can I do something that can build up love? And I think that that's an amazing thought process to take with us. And we thank you all for being with us this week. And if you have not yet already, please leave a star and written review on whatever platform you are doing. It makes a huge difference. We have just broken another milestone, and it's all because of you and sharing us through word of mouth. So we thank you all for being with you, and we will be with you again next week.